Welcome to today's deep dive. We're going to be checking out the Stress Management Podcast with Alex Walker. It's really uh, packed with strategies for dealing with, well, something we probably all struggle with, stress. You know that feeling, right? Like stress is just an inevitable part of life, something we just have to kind of grin and bear.
Yeah.
Well, Alex's podcast suggests we might have more control than we think.
What's really interesting is that Alex doesn't completely demonize stress. He actually starts by kind of making a distinction between acute stress and chronic stress.
So not all stress is created equal.
Exactly. Think of acute stress as that jolt of energy you get when you face a challenge, like right before a presentation. A little nerve-wracking, sure, but it can also sharpen your focus and help you perform better.
Makes sense. So it's like stress in small doses can actually be a good thing.
Exactly. It becomes a problem when it's constant, and that's what we call chronic stress. And this is where it gets really interesting. Alex actually cites a study that found 75%, a whopping 75% of adults experience moderate to high levels of stress regularly.
Wow.
That's most of us.
Hmm.
And it could, manifest in ways we might not even realize, like headaches, fatigue, that feeling of brain fog, even mood swings,
Okay, that's hitting a little too close to home.
right?
If that's so common, what can we actually do about it?
Well, that's exactly what Alex's podcast explores, these practical techniques to manage that chronic stress. He dives into four main areas: mindfulness, setting boundaries, exercise, and then self-compassion.
Let's start with mindfulness. I'll admit, I always thought it was a little too woo-woo for me. Is it really as effective as everyone says?
Well, Alex was actually a skeptic too, until he started incorporating some simple mindfulness practices into his own life
Mm.
and seeing the results. One thing that he emphasizes is that it doesn't have to involve hours of meditation. Even just taking a few minutes each day to focus on your breath and bringing your attention to the present moment really can have a significant impact.
So even in the middle of a crazy day, I could just take 5 minutes to close my eyes and breathe. Would that actually make a difference?
That's exactly what Alex recommends. It's about creating these little pockets of calm, these mini retreats throughout your day to just kind of reset and reconnect with yourself.
Okay, I'm starting to see how that could actually work. But is there any science behind this? Or is it just like a placebo effect?
All the science is there.
Yeah.
Studies have shown that mindfulness meditation can actually reduce the stress hormone cortisol by up to 25%, which is pretty significant. Think about it this way. Imagine you're about to give a big presentation.
Yeah.
And you're feeling those nerves kick in. Taking just 5 minutes to practice mindfulness beforehand could actually lower your stress hormones and help you think more clearly.
That is fascinating. I'm actually starting to get on board with this mindfulness thing. What about setting boundaries? I am terrible at saying no. I always end up overcommitting myself.
That's something that a lot of us struggle with. We think being a yes person makes us helpful and agreeable, but it can actually backfire and create more stress.
So how do you actually set those boundaries without feeling like you're letting people down?
It's not about being confrontational. It's more about, giving yourself permission to protect your time and your energy and without guilt.
Mm-hmm.
Alex suggests evaluating requests carefully before you automatically say yes. Ask yourself, do I actually have the bandwidth for this right now? And if the answer is no, don't be afraid to decline. You're not being selfish. You're actually prioritizing your well-being.
I guess it's like putting on your own oxygen mask first before helping others, right?
Exactly. And by, setting those clear boundaries, you create space for the things that really matter to you, the things that energize and fulfill you.
That makes a lot of sense.
hmm
So we've got mindfulness and setting boundaries. What else did Alex recommend for managing stress?
Well, he's a big advocate for exercise.
Uh-oh.
And before you groan, it doesn't have to be anything strenuous. Even a short walk can be incredibly effective.
Okay, that's more my speed. I'm not exactly marathon material.
Me neither. But even, gentle movement can have a profound impact on your stress levels.
So it's not about pushing yourself to the limit. It's about finding something you enjoy that gets you moving.
Precisely. And there's a scientific reason for it too. Exercise, releases endorphins, which are your body's natural mood boosters. So it's not just about clearing your head, it's actually about changing your brain chemistry.
I definitely feel better after a good workout, even if it's just a quick walk. Maybe I need to stop making excuses and just get moving more often.
It can be as simple as taking a walk during your lunch break or putting on some music and dancing around your living room. The key is to find what works for you and make it a regular part of your routine.
All right, so mindfulness, boundaries, exercise. What was that fourth technique Alex mentioned?
This one might be the most important of all. Self-compassion.
Okay. I'll admit, I'm a little skeptical about this one. Isn't that just letting yourself off the hook?
It's not about making excuses or lowering your standards. It's about, treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer to a friend who's struggling. We often have this inner critic that's constantly berating us for our mistakes and shortcomings.
Oh, I know that voice all too well.
Self-compassion is about recognizing that we all make mistakes, we all have flaws, and it's okay to be imperfect. It's about silencing that inner critic and offering ourselves grace and forgiveness.
So instead of beating myself up over a mistake, I should try to, I guess, be more understanding and supportive of myself.
Exactly. It's about shifting from self-criticism to self-support. Imagine you're working on this challenging project and you hit a roadblock. Instead of thinking, I'm such an idiot, I'll never figure this out, try saying to yourself, everyone makes mistakes. It's okay to struggle. I'm learning and growing from this.
That's a really different way of thinking about it. Do you think it's really possible to silence that inner critic? Mine can be pretty relentless.
It takes practice, but yes,
Yeah.
it is possible. And the benefits are significant. Research shows that people who practice self-compassion experience less anxiety, greater resilience, and increased motivation. It's like building a buffer against stress.
This is giving me a lot to think about. We've covered so much ground already. Mindfulness, setting boundaries, exercise, and self-compassion. It's a lot to take in.
It is, but the good news is, you don't have to implement all of these techniques at once. Just start with the one that resonates most with you and see how it impacts your life.
That's great advice. We'll be right back to delve a little deeper into each of these techniques, so stick with us. All right, I'm ready to dig a little deeper into these stress-busting techniques. Mindfulness really caught my attention. Like, how do you actually make it a part of your daily life?
It's funny, Alex actually talks about how he used to picture mindfulness as this like grand, almost monastic thing, like sitting on a mountaintop for hours on end.
Yeah.
But he realized that that's not realistic for most people.
Right.
And it's not necessary.
Yeah, that image definitely popped into my head, too.
What Alex discovered and what he emphasizes in his podcast is that mindfulness can be woven into like those little moments throughout your day. He gives this great example. Feeling overwhelmed at work, step away from your desk, even for just a minute or two. Focus on your breath. Notice the sensations of your feet on the ground. It's about like those mini resets that can help you regain your composure.
I love that idea. It feels much more approachable than what I always imagined. But
Yeah.
But does it really work? Like, is it just a temporary distraction, or does it actually shift something deeper?
Remember that study about mindfulness reducing cortisol levels?
Mm-hmm.
That's not just some like feel-good effect. It's an actual physiological change.
Yeah.
And it makes sense when you think about how mindfulness works. It's about like training your mind to focus on the present moment rather than getting caught up in worries about the past or anxieties about the future. You're literally changing your brain's response to stress.
So it's not just about feeling calmer in the moment. It's about building resilience over time.
Exactly. It's like building a muscle. The more you practice mindfulness, the easier it becomes to access that state of calm, even when things get hectic. And the benefits extend beyond, stress management. It can improve focus, enhance creativity, even strengthen relationships.
Okay, I'm officially convinced I need to give this a try. Let's talk about boundaries. I think I struggle with this one the most. I'm such a people pleaser, it feels almost impossible to say no.
I hear you. And Alex actually addresses this directly in his podcast.
Okay.
He says a lot of us fall into the trap of thinking that, saying yes all the time makes us like good people.
Yeah.
But constantly overcommitting ourselves can actually lead to resentment, burnout, and even more stress.
So how do you shift that mindset? How do you learn to say no without feeling guilty?
It's a process,
Yeah.
but Alex offers a great starting point.
Okay.
He suggests asking yourself two simple questions before agreeing to anything.
Right.
First, do I actually have the time and energy for this? And second, does this align with my values and priorities?
Those are such simple questions, but I think I often skip right over them, especially when I feel pressured to say yes.
It's so easy to like default to that automatic yes, but here's the thing. Saying no to things that drain you actually frees you up to say a more enthusiastic yes to the things that truly matter, the things that light you up.
I love that reframing. It's not about being selfish. It's about being intentional with your time and energy.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that your needs are just as important as everyone else's. It's not selfish to prioritize your own well-being.
Okay, I'm starting to feel empowered already. What about exercise? I know it's supposed to be good for stress, but sometimes it feels like just another chore to add to my already overwhelming to-do list.
Alex emphasizes that it doesn't have to be a chore, and and it doesn't have to be intense. It's about finding movement that you genuinely enjoy. Maybe it's dancing around your living room, going for a hike in nature, or taking a yoga class. The key is to make it something you look forward to, not dread.
So it's less about pushing yourself to the limit and more about finding what feels good for your body and mind.
Exactly, and it's about consistency.
Okay.
Aim for at least 30 minutes of like moderate intensity exercise most days of the week.
Got it.
But even, 10-minute bursts here and there can make a difference.
I I definitely notice a difference in my mood and energy levels when I'm exercising regularly. Maybe I need to reframe it as a form of self-care rather than like another item to check off my list.
That's a great way to think about it. And remember, exercise has all sorts of other benefits besides stress reduction. It boosts your mood, improves sleep, strengthens your immune system, and even helps protect against chronic diseases.
All right, I'm getting motivated. What about self-compassion? I'm still not quite sure I understand what that actually looks like in practice.
Think of it as like the antidote to that inner critic we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
It's about treating yourself with the same kindness, understanding, and forgiveness that you would offer to a loved one who's going through a tough time.
I definitely tend to be much harder on myself than I am on anyone else.
That's a common experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's where self-compassion comes in. It's about acknowledging your own humanity, recognizing that you're not perfect, and that's okay.
So instead of beating myself up over a mistake, I should try to approach it with more, I guess, understanding and acceptance.
Exactly. Alex suggests starting by, noticing those negative thoughts that pop up and challenging them. Instead of saying, I'm such an idiot for messing that up, try saying, everyone makes mistakes. It's a learning opportunity. What can I do differently next time?
So it's about shifting from self-judgment to self-support.
Uh-huh.
It sounds simple, but I think it's going to be a real challenge to actually put it into practice.
It does take practice, but the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. And it's worth the effort because self-compassion has been shown to have a profound impact on our well-being. It reduces anxiety, boosts resilience, and even enhances our ability to cope with difficult emotions.
This is fascinating. I'm starting to see how all of these techniques, mindfulness, setting boundaries, exercise, and self-compassion, are interconnected. They all seem to feed into this idea of taking care of ourselves, both physically and mentally.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about recognizing that our well-being is like a holistic thing.
Yeah.
When we take care of ourselves in one area, it ripples out and affects all the others.
I'm so glad we're having this conversation. I'm feeling inspired to prioritize my own well-being and try some of these techniques out for myself.
That's fantastic to hear. Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about progress. Just, start small, be patient with yourself, and celebrate those little victories along the way.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear more. We'll be back in a moment to wrap up this deep dive and leave you with some food for thought. And we're back, ready to wrap up our deep dive into stress management.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? From, understanding how stress actually works to exploring all these practical techniques like mindfulness, boundaries, exercise, and self-compassion.
I feel like we've given our listeners a whole new perspective on stress and a toolbox full of strategies to manage it.
And the best part is, these aren't just one-size-fits-all solutions. They're tools you can really adapt and personalize to fit your own life and your own needs.
Yeah, it's not about finding some like magical cure for stress because let's be real, it's a part of life. It's about learning to navigate it in a way that feels healthy and empowering.
That's such a key point. We're not, aiming to eliminate stress completely, but rather to build our resilience, to develop those coping mechanisms that allow us to thrive even when things get challenging.
It's like learning to surf. You can't control the waves, but you can learn to ride them.
That's a perfect analogy.
Mm.
And remember, it's a process, not a destination. There will be days when you feel like you're wiping out, and that's okay. The key is to keep practicing, to keep learning, and to be kind to yourself along the way.
So much of what we've talked about today comes back to that idea of self-compassion.
It really does. It's about recognizing that we're all human, we all make mistakes, and that's okay. It's about giving ourselves the same grace and understanding that we would, offer to a friend.
I think that's a great message to leave our listeners with, that self-compassion is not a luxury, it's a necessity.
especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with messages that tell us like we need to be doing more, achieving more, being more.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in that hustle culture and forget to take care of ourselves.
And that's why practices like mindfulness, setting boundaries, and prioritizing movement are so crucial. They're not just about, managing stress. They're about reclaiming our time, our energy, and ultimately our well-being.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious to get your take on something. It feels like stress has become such a pervasive part of modern life. What does this tell us about the world we live in?
It's a great question. And I think it speaks to the fact that we live in a culture that often glorifies busyness and productivity, leading many of us to feel overwhelmed and burnt out.
Yeah.
We're constantly connected, constantly stimulated, and it can be incredibly difficult to disconnect and recharge.
It's like we've lost the art of slowing down, of simply being.
And that's why it's so important to prioritize self-care and stress management. It's not about being lazy or unproductive. It's about taking care of ourselves so that we can, show up fully in all areas of our lives.
So if there's one thing we want our listeners to take away from this deep dive, what would it be?
I'd say it's this. You have the power to manage your stress and create a life that feels more, you know, balanced and fulfilling. It's not about eliminating stress altogether. It's about developing those healthy coping mechanisms and building resilience.
And remember, you don't have to do it alone. There are resources and support available. Therapists, coaches, support groups, online communities. Don't be afraid to reach out for help if you need it.
Absolutely. We all need a little support sometimes, especially when it comes to navigating the complex world of stress.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. It's been an incredibly enlightening conversation.
The pleasure was all mine. I hope our listeners feel empowered to take charge of their stress and create a life that feels more aligned with their values and aspirations.
And to our amazing listeners, we encourage you to explore the Stress Management Podcast further. It's a treasure trove of information and practical tips. And remember, you have the power to manage your stress and create a life you love. Until next time, take care of yourselves,